I want to tell you about a story of two readers. It's actually a story about me and my daughter, and it will play into this model that I'm going to be teaching you about. So I got a good start as a reader and ended up being a pretty good reader fairly early on for my generation. Early on for our generations, like third or fourth or fifth grade. Now the pressure is down so low for kids to be good readers that happens maybe in second and third, that kids kind of become fluent and be already identified as that advanced reader that we're talking about today. So what happened to me? I started out reading like Amelia Bedelia and then moved into Nate the Great, and I read a few Judy Blume books. But my mom said I really wasn't a hooked reader until I found the Nancy Drew series. And I read all the Nancy Drew series books that our school library had. So if you could plot my development on this model here, that's a developmental model of reading instruction, you would have seen that I probably figured out how to decode pretty early on. And I started to master high frequency words, that purple circle. And then I practiced enough reading with the Amelia Bedelias and the Nate the Great that I was growing in fluency. And with the reading of all those series of Nancy Drew, I became quite fluent. So I was moving in time to this upper level part of the model, improving my decoding fluency, and moving into an area where reading comprehension and learning more vocabulary was more important. I needed to learn more about the affixes of our languages and learn more about Greek and Latin roots. So the thing that is kind of important to tell about this story is that it contrasts with my daughter's story. She actually started, one of our daughters, she started decoding much earlier, and she was quickly learning the words in second and third grade, so much so that by the time she was in third grade, her teacher identified that she was at a level W, and she was pretty fluent already. So that's a couple years ahead of her mom. And the challenge of her story is that this aspect of the model, this is kind of the background of the whole model, motivation and engagement. Was this young girl that I'm telling you about, was she hooked into reading? And was that an important part of my story? Well, let me tell you how it all played out. So one of our daughters, when she was identified as being a level W, the teacher kind of, I believe, got confused about what it meant to challenge this student, my daughter. And so the teacher said that our daughter needed to be reading a level W, which is her highest level. So she was way advanced, already fluent. Her pressing needs were to be developing her vocabulary and comprehension. But when she was reading independently, she was expected to read level W. So that is like a sixth grade level, and she's a third grade student. So there's a gap there. She's able to do it with instruction and for testing, but for the purposes of enjoyment or pleasure and being engaged, she really wasn't there. She tried a few W books, like A Wrinkle in Time and Inkheart. We kind of helped her get through A Wrinkle in Time. It was challenging for her when she was 8 or 7, seven turning into 8. And so guess what happened when the expectation for reading for pleasure for this third grade student, even though she was advanced, when that was placed on her and she tried a few of those higher level books and she didn't like it, guess what happened to her as a reader? She stopped reading. She had a year of almost no reading because of an expectation that was put on her that was a little too high, and she lost motivation. And in contrast to her, I was given the freedom to read all the Nancy Drews that I wanted. And then I kind of exhausted them, and I kind of maybe got bored. And so I moved up and I started reading Agatha Christie, which would be like a late middle school level series of books. Again, another series, but I learned more about the world through these Agatha Christie books because they were set in Great Britain, and so and they were set 100 years prior. So I learned about that time period. I learned about the vocabulary. I learned a lot about the genre of mystery, and that just kept me growing as a reader. So because I was given the freedom to read widely, my motivation was never squelched. And so I kept going up this developmental timeline, expanding my reading into harder and harder books. I started reading, things like Jane Eyre and Pride and Prejudice, more and more challenging high school level books, even as a middle schooler, because it was interesting to me and the books prepared the way. So what does that have to do with what should you do with your really strong readers? Well, we need to absolutely continue to challenge them and develop their comprehension, their vocabulary, but we have to keep in mind they have a great asset. They already are engaged. They want to read. So let's not squelch that. So let's go through the read widely. So these are some of our guidelines for advanced readers. The most important thing is many times, not all the time, but most of the time, let them have their choice of text. Okay, just like my story, I've done studies of other avid readers, and they almost invariably read widely what they want. They maybe go into series that aren't super intellectual, but they read a ton of them, and then they move on. And then they move on to a different genre. So choice is such a profound motivator for developing a love of reading, so don't squelch it. Also, don't just rely on what they can read themselves, even though they're advanced. You can do the teacher read aloud, and you can read something even higher to them. So you read aloud as much as possible, if not daily, at least every other day. And then they can listen along, again, to harder text. So if you have advanced readers, maybe they don't need to listen to the same text that some of your weaker readers are listening to. Maybe they can listen to something that's 2 or 3 or 4 years above their reading level. Definitely, if you can have a classroom library, that's great because they need access to content books, lots of choices. If you can give book talks or have your other students share what they're reading, or other classes share what they're reading, and maybe even make book commercials that are in the name of fun, but not so much like a book report that has kind of a burden on it, that will inspire them to see more possibilities out there. Another thing you can do is keep a collection of, we've read these books. So maybe you make a word chain with little strips of construction paper, and they write the book that they've read, and you build a chain that circles the room of all the kids' books. Maybe they just keep record on some sort of bulletin board or in a journal, something that is just a record of this is important to us and we value it, and we can go and look at what other people have read. One of the things to get them to read widely that can help is to think about thematic instruction. You probably already are doing some of that, and maybe you want to do more so that you can expose them to wider genres. So when you are teaching something in science, let them see lots of texts on that topic, both fiction and nonfiction, and that will inspire them probably to read more than they might otherwise. And then keep that theme going for a good long while, and bring in as many fields as you can. Maybe some history fits in with that science, maybe some math. And then bring in a lot of books from the library to get them to keep reading. Maybe you want to try an online book review site. There are some there for kids. If you've got older kids, Goodreads might be applicable. Definitely try to inspire your librarian to give book talks and tour the library and help her feel like she's empowered to inspire your readers in your class. And also don't dissuade them from going online and reading things online. Wonderopolis is a great site I highly recommend. There are others out there where they can learn about the world, both fiction and nonfiction. And then I recommend that you encourage them to collect genres. So that's what this is for. This is a sheet that your older readers can add the names of different books that they've read in each of these genres. This isn't a complete list of all the genres, but it gives some place to start. So you want to encourage that, but don't push it so hard, like especially if you have that still fragile reader like my daughter was in third grade. She wasn't quite established as an avid reader yet, and pushing her to, well, you need to stop reading a realistic fiction. You have to go to fantasy. That might not have been the best thing. And so that didn't happen to her, but we did see how motivation and engagement played a big role in her stopping as a reader, at least for that year. Another thing that can be good is to do some shared reading, especially with the earlier grades. You can read aloud poetry. Poetry is really the best, but also pick things that are just kind of above the level of kids, short selections that they might not otherwise read. And Reading Rewards is a program where they can get, as it says, rewards for their reading. And it's not revolving around tests, so some of you may like that. So those are just some brainstorm ideas of how to get your kids to read widely.